please welcome the incredible Lisa Carpenter.
Thank you so much for having me on, Renee. I know it's been a long time. It's taken a long time for us to finally connect this way, so I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and I think it all goes with, it's matching with the theme of like balance in life and how I had to reschedule and then you did, and you're like, hee, here we are finally, but like fully understanding. There was no like shame or blame in any of this. And that's what I loved about you. You're like, oh geez, like I get it. Like life is life.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You have kids. You're a mama.
I do. Yeah. But I'm kind of an interesting mama, right? Because I got two grown kids, 24 and 23. And then I've got a 13-year-old, which is wild because I feel like Jake was just born and now he's going into grade 8. So that's been a wild ride, like beginning again with the baby when I felt like I was almost done, but I wasn't because I decided to have another baby.
I love babies. Yeah. Our second son, Noah, was a surprise. Now I'm like, for sure I'm done. Had he not been a surprise, I would have been good with one, but we have 2 and it's amazing.
I had a psychic once tell me, it wasn't a psychic, it was a palm reader. And she's like, you're going to have 3 children. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I have 2. I'm married. I'm done. We're finished. And she's like, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have 3. And sure enough, new partnership, new baby. I'm like, wow, there's the 3rd. So I don't know, those witchy people there, they know something. So don't just discount what they tell you.
They do know something. I've always envisioned myself with 3 kids, and it's kind of like, like this feeling, the sensation of something about your life. And I'm curious if our dog is that 3rd living soul, because I love him like a child.
Right.
But I'm in my early 40s. There's no way I'm birthing another baby right now. I'm good. I'm done. My body's like, we're good. It's time to vacation.
Don't do it. A dog is like another child because they take just as much work, as much care. And in some regards, they take more work because you can't just, you can't just leave them all the time, right? Like dogs really, anyways, I don't have dogs. I have cats. But I think you asked about, I don't know how we went on this tangent. But yeah, I've been, other than having 3 boys, I've been an entrepreneur for over 24 years now, running multiple businesses. I started as a personal trainer way back in the day. And then I moved into teaching nutrition. Then I moved my business online. Then I burnt my business down and started again. Like, it has been a wild ride. You have to be super resilient if you're going to be an entrepreneur, because staying power is a whole thing.
That's it. Even like this podcast, this is episode 300 and something, maybe 309. I don't even know. And there's days when I'm like, nope, I'm good. Yep, we're good. I've done it. I've run the course. And I said this before multiple times on the show, that the moment when you feel like you're in line with your purpose and this is fulfilling work, yet it's something about it isn't working, you're not reaching your goals, you're like, maybe I've completed this journey. Maybe I've completed this work. And then God goes, pow, nope. And then you'll get like tagged in an Instagram post, this message you shared, Renee, saved my life. That's being dramatic. And they're like, oh, all right, that was God's note. Got to keep going. Got to keep going.
That's interesting that you bring up podcasting, because my podcast, I think we're up to over 300 episodes as well. And I've currently just hit pause on it. I'm like, I need to step back here. I need to regroup. I need to decide what it is I want to be talking about now, how I want to talk about it. Because, after 300 episodes, it's a lot of talking. And, I started my podcast back in the day. Honestly, the reason I started my podcast was because I was pissed off at Instagram. Because back then stories were, true story, stories were 30 seconds long. And I have a lot to say, and 30 seconds was not enough. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start my own podcast so I can say what I want for as long as I want. And whoever wants to tune in and listen is welcome to. And that's how my podcast started. And then it's just evolved and grown. And then, we got more serious about it. And now we're just hitting a pause on it while we regroup and go, okay, what do we really want moving forward? What do I really want moving forward? Where do I want to spend my time and my energy? Is this feeling congruent for what I'm wanting in my life right now? Because as you know, I've been doing a lot of traveling. So podcasting has also been challenging because of traveling. And yeah,
but here's what I love about those bouts of travel. We're about to go away for a week. Not that big of a deal. It forces you to pre-record. Like right now we're committed to 2 episodes a week. And what I do is I look out and I always think I need to prep for the time I'm gone as well as for the week after, because you're come back, you're just playing catch up. But when we get ahead, it's such a beautiful thing. And this is like anything in life. But I feel like there's also this shame about not getting ahead. A lot of people use weekends or evenings to get ahead in anything. But when it comes to the podcast, getting ahead feels good, because then it allows me to really think about the next guest, prepare for the next guest, prepare for all the social and the marketing. But we often find ourselves like last minute, my assistant's like, Renee, we need a solo episode by today at noon. And I'm like, crap. Oh no, what am I going to talk about today? It always works out.
With 300 episodes, I'm curious why you haven't repurposed some of them.
We could.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
That's what we did for a while, because I needed a break. And, with that many episodes, I know that somebody who's tuning in today has missed something awesome that I said 2 years ago.
Oh, 100%.
So yeah, we just kind of repurpose them. And I think that this is the thing as women, that we get to start to look at where we put pressure on ourselves, that it has to be done a certain way, and that there's no way around it. Yet look at how many times you and I had to reschedule because things happened. So where in our lives are we being easygoing, and where are other areas in our lives where we're like, oh, this is the rules. This is how we have to do it. And the more I've let go of, well, this is how I have to do it, or I'm going to feel bad if I'm hitting a pause on the podcast, or whatever it is that's going on in my life, I've really learned at the end of the day, like none of this stuff in the long term really matters.
Nope. It's like the perfectionism. So create these standards about how we want to show up in life and business and love. And then we put so much pressure on ourselves to abide by these standards. And it's almost like you look for outside validation that you don't have to do this. And a perfect example is I occasionally tune into Layla Hormozi's podcast because she's like a top ranking show. She doesn't have perfect production every time. In fact, one of her solo episodes recently, she was on a treadmill and I think she just recorded a voice note on her phone and she's like out of breath. So it's kind of awkward too. And I'm like, this is weird, but also it's her. It's like, if you know her, it's her. And I'm like, okay, well, if she can record an episode while on a treadmill. And then there's my friend, Heather Chauvet. She was like the best mother, and still is, mother parenting podcast. When she was first starting out, this was like years ago when I tuned in, she would do the same thing. She was bringing her dog for a walk on a busy street using plugged in headphones into her phone on a voice note. You could hear her dog. You could hear the street, and it was loud. Yep. The content was still good.
Yeah.
So imagine if she subscribed to really high standards, she wouldn't have got it out. And you know what? Despite the distraction of the noise of the street, what she was saying was just so game changing for me.
Yeah. That's always been my jam. There's still a podcast up on my show where I was barbecuing chicken and a train went by in the background, right? Because this is what I tell people. We have to just start, because if we wait for things to be perfect, they'll never be perfect. And for someone like me, doing prep ahead of time, like batching episodes, is so challenging for me, because I want to record when I've got something good coming through me. And sometimes that's not the most convenient time. It's usually when I'm walking out of the gym, or I'm out for a walk, or, in this case, I was barbecuing chicken, had to get flipped. I was in the middle of the episode and the chicken had to get flipped. So I just flipped the chicken and there we went. Right. But, yeah, so often as women, we really get caught up and it needs to be a certain way. And there's so many examples out there of women who are doing great things in the world and they're not doing it perfectly. And that's actually what draws us to people. If somebody comes off as too perfect to me, because I've been coaching for a long time, So I kind of see behind the veil of that. And it actually pushes me away from them. It doesn't make me want to lean in and connect with them more. So I love people who are willing to just show up and try new things and do things a little bit messy. And, you know, the way I see it is if my audio is really bad on this episode, my team will clean it up as best they can. Yeah. But that, you know, it means that that person isn't meant to listen to that specific episode. And that's okay.
Yeah. Imperfect action.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like there are some people online that I've admired for quite some time, and everything they do, they put out everything, even their stories on vacation are so polished to the point where it's hard for me to find relevancy to them, because I get it, but we also have our days where we feel like crap. We also have our days where there's bad stuff happening in our life, and one specific person never posts anything negative. Wow. Or if she does, it's like some very crafted story to make sure that, and I get it, that's her brand. But I also can't imagine the pressure that she puts herself and her team on to make sure everything is polished.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it breaks people, right? This is what leads to burnout in a lot of ways, right? Because that high expectation that women are reaching for, and men get into it as well, but you know, I had a lot of things happen to me in 2023. And although I wasn't sharing, you know, the details of them, because we don't need to share all the details of our lives, even to show up real, I did my best to really let people know, like, this is what it looks like when things are hard. And this is what it looks like to let go of stuff. And this is what I'm doing to kind of support myself moving through it. But this polished, you know, Instagram version of life, it's just not real. And travel's really shown me that, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the beautiful videos of Zanzibar. I was recently in Zanzibar, and it really is that gorgeous. But there's people everywhere. Like these like pristine beaches where it's just one person riding a horse. No. There's like 50 people on horses. It's crazy. So I'm personally in my own brand just committed to like, this is the real deal. So sometimes I get to be polished and done up. And sometimes it's hot, sweaty mess coming out of the gym, which, you know, you do so well also. I saw you on the treadmill this morning doing your thing.
Oh yeah. No makeup. Yeah. It's all about contrast.
Yeah.
And I think it's the contrast where we can find that relation to the person or the idea. And I actually shared an Instagram post yesterday about how the story I kept telling myself as well as people about being a power couple and having 2 babies in the same year as launching a business and getting media coverage and all this attention was I was telling myself a lie that, and also what terrible message I was sending out to other women saying they have to do the same thing to be successful. And that's what I thought it was. And what I realize now is that sometimes even just showing up is the ticket to winning. And it's like, there's another post that I really loved. I gotta remember who, I think it was Jim Quick that shared this. So there was 2 images. At the top, there was like 5 cups of water. And on the bottom was 5 cups of water. And the top part says, this is what people think consistency looks like. And it's 5 cups of water perfectly filled up. And the bottom image was, this is what consistency is really about. The first cup is half full. The second cup is almost empty. The third cup is overflowing. So when we set these expectations and these standards about how we should be showing up, if you're looking at all the full cups, that's a lot of pressure. But if you realize that, hey, some days are great, some days are not. Some workouts are the best. You feel so accomplished. And other workouts are like, why am I even here?
Right. We get so attached to stories that we're telling ourselves about ourselves. And this year has been so dismantling for me, right? Because you've known me for a while. I'm a really disciplined person. I'm a very committed person, right? At the gym every morning, just doing fitness shows, the whole 9 yards. And this year I decided, well, I'm going to spend the year traveling. Well, you can't do consistent workouts when you're traveling. And some would make the argument of, well, yeah, Lisa, you could still track your macros every day and you could still make sure you make those workouts. But I looked at, well, how do I want my life to feel this year? Do I want to have this new experience of traveling? Do I want to be this person? And in order to do that, I had to not be attached to the identity of the person that I'd been the year before. So challenging. So what does that mean? What does it mean if you're not going to be tracking all your macros, Lisa? What does it mean if you're not going to be doing the heavy things in the gym? What does it mean to not work with a coach, right? Because I've worked with a fitness coach for years, but to just let it all go and see what I could learn about myself in the exploration of this new version of me. And, it's really wild, the things that we tell ourselves, and everything in our life is a made up story. Everything. And I'm not any less committed because I had the year that I had versus how I used to live. And now I get to integrate, well, what is that going to look like for me moving forward? But I think that that's what I want your listeners to hear is they so often get caught up in living by these rules that were established by nobody but themselves. And at any point in time, we can break the rules. You don't get an extra brownie badge for doing anything in your life. It's, when you leave this planet, are you going to feel proud of the things that you tried, of the things that you let go of? Are you going to break free from, the stories and the limiting beliefs that you were trapped in? That makes for a life well lived.
I'm actually reading the book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying right now. And it's so powerful because nobody ever said, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have worked harder. I wish I would have done that thing. The regrets were mainly about connecting with people and not having enough time for their family and living a life that's so not true to them. Yeah. So like living a life that's so not fulfilling because we think this is what is expected of us.
Well, in 2023, when my relationship fell apart, everything that I thought was important, that I'd made important to me, was so not important. Like none of it mattered. And as I've traveled, because I've always wanted to travel the globe, it so quickly became, it wasn't even about the place, it was about the people I've gotten to connect with, the clients that I've made from around the globe, the friends that I have that I don't see that often. That's what it's become about for me. So I love doing what I do in my work. I can't imagine doing anything different, but my lens of success and what's important is so incredibly different now. But it really took my life being shaken up hard to get that. And unfortunately, for most people, it does take some massive catalyst in their life for them to look at things a different way or be forced to look at things a different way, or they don't and they remain a victim of their lives. And that's a horrible place to live as well.
Man, if I could be judgmental for a second, I have such a thing for victims. I think there's seasons in our life where you go through stuff and you're like, what's going on? And you're talking to people and you're crying and you're complaining because you're figuring it out. Yeah. But after a point when it's time to let it go, but you still hang on to it, I don't have the patience for that.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
But people don't even know that they're being victims.
No. And I think it takes like a good friend to say something in a very respectful way, to say, you realize you're stuck in this loop, like the story you keep telling yourself. But so you've been through a lot lately, and you coach people. You help people. How have your life experiences enabled you to be able to show up for people in the way that you do?
So a big part of my work is I work with a lot of leaders. I work with a lot of men and women that are doing really big things in the world, and they're really great at leading other people. But quite often they end up, in my care, so to speak, as a coach, because they are not in integrity with themselves. They're not leading themselves very well. So they're leading from the outside, but they're not leading from the inside. So they're constantly out of integrity with themselves, right? Which creates this lack of congruence, which creates this, they're always kind of on the struggle bus, so to speak. So everything that I've gone through in my life has forced me to live my work, right? So I'm not just a coach that sits on this pedestal and I'm going to preach to you what I learned in coaching school. I've lived and breathed my work, and everything that I've had to go through was about, can I show up and still be in integrity with myself? Can I be responsible for myself? And there were many moments where I wanted to be a victim. And you know what? It's okay to be that, but you got to pull yourself out of it too. You've got to find your way. my commitment to continue to take care of myself when some days I didn't want to get out of bed, right? This is the work, is how you lead yourself through times of adversity so that you can show up and still lead in your life, because most of us are, we have other responsibilities outside of, our family. We also have jobs and other people that we're committed to. So it's really about getting into being responsible for yourself, regardless of what life throws at you.
Mm-hmm. I think about consistency. So I say consistency is your currency. Mm. The only way to be consistent is to have discipline. Mm. And some of the most disciplined people I know are okay doing the work that's boring because it's monotonous, it's repetitive, knowing that those are baby steps to crossing a finish line. And a perfect example would be my husband, who always wakes up at 4 a.m. and he does the same routine every morning. And I'm like, gah, that's so boring. Like, we're supposed to have these magical morning routines. Sure, there are statistics and data that back that there are certain things that successful people do every morning. But I asked him that. I'm like, are you ever bored of this? And of course he is. Of course, some days he's bored of going to the gym. Some days, we're bored of doing the things. But when you build the muscle of discipline and you're headed in the right direction, and you have faith in that direction, good things happen. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be next month, but they will happen. Yeah. And it'll be like that. I asked my personal trainer the other day, because I've been lifting heavier, going harder, eating more protein, like dialing stuff in. This takes forever. You know this all too well. Yes. And I asked him the other day, I said, Alan, is there a moment when you actually look in the mirror and you just all of a sudden notice the change? It's like, there it is. He goes, yep. I go, when is that going to happen? He's like, if you just keep doing what you're doing. And the other day, because I'm doing 75 hard, you have to take progress pictures. And I was kind of in a hurry, and I was putting on like the same underwear and bra that I wear in my progress pictures. And as I was like lifting my leg through my underwear, I noticed a part of my butt muscle flexing that I had never seen before because it was never there. And I was like, oh my God, there it is. There it is. There's part of a butt muscle that is growing. And it's like the tiniest little thing, massive achievement for me. I was like, yes, here we go. And the moment you get that momentum, you start seeing the progress. Is like, it's almost becomes like drinking your own Kool-Aid in terms of your discipline to actually keep going. It feels good. And speaking of butts, I remember the first time I met you.
Oh my gosh. I knew you were going to, I'm like, oh, the butt story.
I can never, ever forget this moment. I think I saw you from behind, and we were at an event in San Diego, and you're wearing this like tight blue skirt. Do you remember that skirt? Do you still have it?
I do still have that skirt.
And I was like, oh my God, she has the nicest butt I've ever seen. And I was like totally checking you out. And then I met you. Did I even tell you right away that you had a nice butt? Because that's something I would do.
No, but I think that story is so funny. So congratulations on your newly forming butt. But you nailed it, right? Like, you have to be willing to do the unsexy things over and over and over again. And this goes to the inner work too. When you're working on yourself, I mean, I can't tell you how many times in a day I'm having to manage my thoughts, manage my emotions, to stay committed to what it is I want in my life, what it is I want in my relationship, what it is I want for my family, what it is I want for my business. Like, it's not fun or sexy work, right? I'm not getting up at 4:15 anymore. That used to be my life. I also love that we're able to change our minds if something isn't working for us, or if we want to do something different, that we can, right? Again, coming back to that attachment of I'm doing it this way. But when you start to see results and you know that that thing is getting you results, then keep doing that thing. And so often people will lift their heads up and they won't see the results they want yet. So then they shift directions instead of just continuing on the course. And especially in entrepreneurship, I think we've been sold this lie that you just set up a website, get your branding on point, right? Do all the fancy things, show up on Instagram, and everybody will just show up at your door wanting to buy your stuff. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It takes time, effort,
For some
energy.
people.
Maybe for some people. I think there are some people that it works for them that way. But I think if you talk to the majority of people, like I've been in business for, like I said, 24 years. I've had some ups, I've had some downs, and everything in between. Yeah. But I have to keep doing the unsexy work day in and day out for my business to continue to move forward.
What is your least favorite task in business right now?
Oh, right now we are in the social media weeds. So I have a love-hate with social media. I love going on stories because it's easy and light for me. But that's like going to the gym every single day and doing bicep curls with 8-pound weights. Like eventually you have to realize like you might like doing bicep curls, but if you don't lift more weights, they're never going to grow. Going on stories and just sharing, although it feels really good for me, if it's not producing results, why am I spending my time doing that? And that's hard because I know I'm going to have to let it go in some capacity, but we're not really sure where we're pivoting to. So that's why it's like, it's the podcast, it's the Instagram, like, what do we want to do next? And I'm kind of in this space in my life and in my business where I'm like, I don't know what's next, but it's not going to be inside any type of box on social media. So
yeah, my trainer says, lift the same, look the same.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
What he means by that for people who don't do training is that if you aren't lifting heavier as you progress, you're not going to look any different or be any stronger. But that applies to so many things in life. Because here's the thing, if you keep butting up against the same problem over and over again, and it's like repetitive, it's because you're doing the same thing.
That's right.
And you're comfortable. So like you have to be like, think about like being stuck in like a bubble. The only way out is through, and you got to pop it to get out. And you don't know what's on the outside of it. There could be lions, or there could be a waterfall. Maybe there's somebody handing you cotton candy. I don't know. We are so fearful of that change to put on a little bit more weight because you know what? It hurts. You're stretching that muscle. It hurts so much to the point where you want to puke. Yeah. But I know that if I compare myself to anybody else, which I never do, I never compare myself at all. And I'm rolling my eyes. Is that the people that I look up to, like you, that have the nice butts, I know go through hell in those moments to achieve that. Most people aren't willing to go that last mile.
Yeah. That's, I went through a massive build. This is a funny story. I went through a massive build in terms of bodybuilding, had to put on a significant amount of weight. And the commitment to myself was I was going to love myself through it, which I did, right? Love my curves until I got to the point where I was like, I'm done. I messaged my coach. I'm like, I'm out. I was up, I won't say my weight, but I was up about 20 pounds heavier than I normally am. And I'm 5'1". So I'm tiny. So 20 pounds on 5'1". I know Dan's always like, are you like a nymph? Like what's going on here?
I know.
That's a lot of extra weight.
Yeah, it is.
So then it was time to cut. For me to cut to get on stage that year, it took me from December until August. That's how long it took to take that off. It was a hard haul. And at the end of it, I was like, meh. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Oh. It was hard. It was hard. But
yeah, but you didn't know.
I didn't know. But this is learning.
If you would have known, you wouldn't have done it.
That's right. But we don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. We have to be willing to try. We have to be willing to go through the discomfort. Even if the outcome on the other side, we're like, don't think I'm going to do that in that way again. Would I do a build again? I would do a build again, but I would do it very, very differently. But that's how we learn and grow and pivot. But if you're not willing to be in the discomfort of it, and humans, we spend every single day doing everything we can to avoid feeling uncomfortable. We are hardwired to move away from discomfort, to move away from pain. But so often we have to move into it. We have to move through it. And people just haven't built the capacity for that anymore. And nowadays, even when we look at how people are parenting, we're coddling our kids. Not that, they don't deserve love and attention. That's not what I'm saying. But we have to be willing to build resiliency in our kids, because otherwise they're going to grow into adults who are like helpless victims running around because they've never had to do hard things. I know that that's not how you parent your kids. It's not how we parent our kids, but it is something that I see going on a lot, where people aren't letting kids do hard things. And I think,
Here's
gosh,
my perspective on this is that we might live in an era now, this generation, where by doing things a certain way is showing the most amount of love, right? So like doing the kids' laundry, packing their school bags, making sure everything is in order for them and they're ready to go for the day, as an example. And I come back to this example all the time. My first week living away from home, as in an all-girls dorm at university, I had to go do laundry. I had never looked at a washing machine before. 18 years old, I had to ask another woman for help. And I was embarrassed. And I'm like, oh, there's the mistake my parents made. And while we think we might not be good mothers because we're giving our kids the autonomy to learn and fail, it actually ends up being the best lesson for them. Because really what we're trying to achieve as parents is to send our kids out of the nest to be functioning societal humans.
That's right.
Where they understand how to cook food on a gas stove, how to do laundry, how to drive a car, gas it up, like the basics. Why are we stripping these possibilities and opportunities away from our children? For what? To be labeled a good mother? Right. Nah. I don't care. Actually, you know what? I don't even care anymore what people think about me as a parent. I used to so much. And I'm like, if you think I suck, you can look in the mirror, because I'll tell you what, I think I'm a great mother.
Amen to that. Listen, you're talking to the woman who was like, I'm going to go away for 30 days. Have fun. Bye. Good moms don't peace out for 30 days. This one did. And in fact, I've been away more than I've been home this year. Right. But, when we do all the things for our kids, we rob them of being proud of themselves.
Yeah,
we take that from them. And we actually make them weak. And then we send them out into the world, and we end up with adult children who still need us. And that's why people do it, because so that they have that feeling of always being needed. And I personally just think that, so many Gen Xers, I'm a Gen Xer, because we were a little bit feral growing up. We were just
totally like drinking out of hose, right? To get it.
Right? Come home when the street light. I think we've overcorrected with our kids, right? We want to do better by our kids, but we're not realizing that we're creating a similar problem. It's different. Now so there is no perfect parent. So why bother even trying to be a perfect parent? So many of the women that I work with really struggle with this idea of being a mom. For me, I struggled with it for years. I felt like I didn't have the mom gene. There was something broken in me. I've learned a lot more about myself and why that was there. But we get to define how we want motherhood to be for us. And what other people think and feel about you is none of your business anyways. It doesn't matter. They're not paying your bills. They're not wiping your kids' butts. So how they feel about how you parent, who cares? We spend so much of our lives being worried about what other people will think about us, when the truth is, we're just worried. We're just judging ourselves. It has nothing to do with even them, right? So that's that victim part that you don't like, right? I'm going to blame other people as to why I have to change my behavior. But the truth is, we have to look at ourselves and say, where am I judging myself? And I've loved watching, because I've known you for years now, I've loved watching you like let go of so much garbage about yourself and just step into who's Renee without all these beliefs that weren't actually you, right? I use the Joey Tribbiani metaphor, that episode of Friends when he was wearing all of Chandler's clothes. Like that's kind of how we are as adults until we're like, wait a minute, I don't like this. And we start stripping off all those layers. It's really cool to witness in people, especially in leaders, because that's when they really step into their leadership.
That's it. And leadership is a responsibility. It is crazy. So this morning, I have this thing about having a clean kitchen and a tidy house before I leave the house for the day or before I go to bed. Because there's nothing like waking up to just cleanliness or coming home from a busy day and things are put away. So anyway, this happened this morning. We were rushing to leave. Today's one of those weird days where my one son has his school outside all day at a park that's like out of the way. So we have to leave earlier. And it's a podcast recording day, so I have to kind of look put together. And we were rushing to leave, and I was looking at the kitchen, and there was dirty pan. Like it was messy from my standards, and I started to get anxiety. But I had a conversation with our house manager the night before, and I just said, you know, how ridiculous it is that I keep doing this. And she's like, it's my job. And I'm like, it's true. That's why we hired her, to do these things. So my husband took a picture of the counter this morning. It's really not that messy. Okay. You might not be able to see this, but anyways, there's a handful of things on the counter, on the stove, and the sink. Literally would take 10 minutes to clean up. He goes, I love this so much. And the why he said that was because he's like, I'm too uptight in my standards of how I want my house to be kept, to the point where it actually causes me to be late, gives me anxiety, makes me think like I'm a terrible wife or mother because I have a dirty house. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with my friend Kira Marie. We're going to spend Christmas in Australia with them. So if you guys know Taki Moore and his family, love them. So Kira's like, Renee, we're excited to have you here for Christmas. I just got to set some expectations. And I was like, oh God, here we go. I don't want to impose. She's like, no. We're so excited to have you. I love Christmas. I love everything about it. I love gifts. I love the season. I love the feeling. I am not going to be the host that cleans up the kitchen 5 times a day. You're lucky if you get it once. So just so you know, it's going to be a little lived in. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so jealous how she can just say that and live it, because I would love that too. And she's like, and that's just the way it's going to be. Why can't we all just do that?
Well,
be like, lower standards.
Giving that to yourself, Renee?
Well, I did it this morning. Right. So like pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. So and I need to journal on this.
For some people, and I talk about this in terms of achievers, right? There's some people out there in the world that need to learn how to put their foot on the gas and go. Like do the things, do the hard things. And then there's others of us that need to learn how to pump the brakes, and that doing the hard things are the easy things. Like the hard things for women like you and I are what other people would consider easy, like leaving the dishes in the sink, or not finishing something and not making it mean anything, right? So many of us wrap our worthiness around these stories and beliefs that we have that are just made up, right? Where did you learn that you have to have a clean house? So I get the feeling like when the cleaners come, so good. Such a good feeling when the cleaners have been through my house, like best day ever. I get that feeling. But to live with anxiety because something's out of place, right? We don't have to live that way, but it is your responsibility, or anybody who's listening. If something creates anxiety, a feeling of anxiety in you, because you are not anxiety, what is that anxiety trying to tell you? What is the story attached to it? Because we can dismiss our emotions. They're not factual, but they are there to try and tell us something. But so many of us are disconnected from what we're feeling. Or you talk about doing the hard thing. Sometimes the hard thing is being with the anxiety, like letting the anxiety be there while you step away from the dishes. This isn't the first time I've heard this, right? And I've had to, I've had lots of clients go through stuff like this, where it's not saying, okay, you never get to have a clean kitchen, but can we get you to the point where you're neutral, whether it's clean or if there's stuff on the counter, can you move to that neutral space? But it requires you expanding your capacity. Yeah. For that discomfort.
It's like my spiritual therapist describes, you got to get to this point. Like what we're trying to achieve is that there could be a rave going on in the room next door and you're still completely at bliss.
Staying neutral.
And this morning, the moment I walked out the door, I was like, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. And I had an extra 10 minutes in the car at the bus stop with my kids to play Wordle on my phone. And we giggled and laughed. And I was like, wow. I was exchanging cleaning a kitchen for these connection moments with my kid. Whoa, very deep. And then I got the text message from Dan saying how much he loved it. Like, of all the things he's ever complimented me on, having a dirty kitchen was one of them.
Right. But did you used to have a hard time being present with your kids? Because I did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So sometimes the cleaning of the kitchen is the way to avoid the discomfort of the other. But you've grown and changed so much now. You're more comfortable being present with your boys, which is cool.
Well, also, the age is a lot. I don't like the newborn stage.
I'm with you. Adult children are the best, let me tell you.
I can't, I'm loving this stage right now because they still got the cuddles. They're still kind of little. And they have can have adult personalities in moments.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's just double click on this entrepreneurship thing and raising kids. How did you do it? What was the balance or imbalance? What was the toughest part? How did you get over those hurdles?
This is such a big question because it was like Lisa version 1.0 versus Lisa version 2.0. Because the way I raised my first two boys, very different from how I've raised Jake, because I had my kind of awakening after Jake was born, right? That's when my partner went off to rehab and my life unraveled. So prior to that, I was all in my dysfunction. So I didn't balance it. I worked all the time. I was like you. I was up at the crack of dawn, get them off to school, working while they were at school. That's all I did. It was work. I didn't have any balance. And then I thought, leaving my marriage would fix the thing. It didn't, because I was the dysfunction and I went with me. So, with Jake, after, I started my personal transformation and real deep dive into self-development and starting to understand the things that I was getting into, not feeling good enough, chasing my worthiness through my accomplishments, even though didn't matter what I accomplished, I still never felt good enough, still never felt deserving. Perfectionism was a huge thing for me. Oh, Renee, I could show you videos of my first course that I did, and you'd be like, who is that woman? Right? I couldn't get on video and just talk like this and be okay with it.
Wow.
It was so just wildly, wildly different. So now I have much better boundaries in my life. That's a huge thing for me. When I'm done work, I'm done work. I don't work around the clock. I don't need to. Yeah. I do less and get better results. There is no balance. What it comes down to for me is knowing what are the things you value most, and are you living in congruence with your values? Because if you live in integrity and congruently with your values, you'll never go wrong. But so often people aren't living in alignment with their values. They're not. And then they're making decisions and they're telling themselves they value those things. Oh, I value family. Well, if you're not spending time with family, you don't value family. If you're telling yourself you value your health and your well-being and your physical body, but you're sitting on the couch eating Cheetos, you're lying to yourself. You don't. And this is where so many leaders are out of integrity with themselves, right? Because they're saying that they value these things, but then they're not actually taking care of those things. They're working all the time. But I want to be with my kids. No, you don't. No, you don't. Otherwise, you'd be setting boundaries around your work. But there's a reason why they get that benefit from overworking, overdoing, overcleaning their house, whatever it may be. We all get benefits from that. So, it's complicated and messy and so beautiful learning about who you are without all the garbage that isn't you. And that's what creates better balance in your life, because then you can make better decisions. But balance as a whole, I don't think it exists. There are periods in my life where my business and stuff that's going on in my business, and I know you get this, has to be a priority because I've got deadlines, I've got a team, we got things, right? They can't just wait because I'm like, I don't feel like it today. If I'm going on stage, if that's a thing for me, then that's a high priority. So I still obviously have time for my family and my business. But, when I went on stage last year, I took August off so I could just use August for that final home stretch to get on stage. So I didn't have to balance other things. And the problem that I see so many women getting into is instead of taking things off their plate, they just juggle another plate. Like they just start spinning another plate. And then they're like, why don't I have balance? Well, maybe you need to put some plates down so that you can actually look at which ones you value, because you are going to be spinning plates. But do you want to be spinning 10 or do you want to be spinning 3? Because you'll find better balance with 3 than you will with 10 or 12 or 15.
Yeah. Busyness is an addiction.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a self-worth issue because we feel inherently that if we're not doing something, that we're not worthy.
Being busy is the same as being an alcoholic or shopping addict or scrolling social media. It's exactly the same. But busy, we reward, right? We get accolades for being productive, where you don't get accolades for being an alcoholic. But it's covering up the same type of stuff. It's just a different coping mechanism. That's it. So that's why this inner work is so important, because if you keep chasing the outer solution, you're just going to move from coping mechanism to coping mechanism. It has to start from the inside. And what's going on with you? What's driving that need to be busy? What are you trying to numb out?
Yep. Facing that fear dead on. As I start to reflect on this like clean kitchen sink syndrome that I have. But when you start to journal, you're like, and you ask the questions, why, or like how, it gets down to like the nitty gritty. You get very granular with where this all started from. And it really comes down to worthiness, how I don't feel like I deserve such a nice house. So I got to make sure that it always looks pristine so that there's a sense of like it being mine. I don't feel like I'm a good mother or a good partner if I have a messy kitchen. What does this mean if we have somebody come over, visit randomly, and they walk into a messy house? Are they going to judge me? Because they certainly wouldn't judge my husband, but are they going to judge me for how messy it is? And if they did, I need to know that it doesn't matter.
Well, it's none of your business, right? Like we said earlier, it's none of your business what they think about you. But I'd love to know, and I think this is a really great question to ask all of your listeners, because I think everybody struggles with varying degrees of not feeling worthy. I've never met somebody who doesn't have that. But how do you measure that? Right? How do you measure that? When will you know that you're worthy enough? When will you know that you're good enough? Like, how clean does your kitchen need to get? How many days does it need to be clean in a row before you decide that you're worthy? Because, let's just use Noah, right? When they put Noah, right? When you first cuddled Noah, did you look at him and think like, wow, you better start working for your worthiness now, kid? Or did you just land in your arms worthy, right? Like you were that person, and your listeners, for everybody, you were that person who was absolutely perfect, needed to do nothing to prove yourself in the world. Yet we grow up thinking like all of a sudden now we have to work to be deserving of these beautiful things that we have in our life. Yeah. We don't.
The change is it's all within. You look at two people that were born and raised into the same life circumstances, yet one goes on to be a successful entrepreneur and the other one becomes an addict. And the addict is the victim. And I'm not shaming these people whatsoever. Different biology, but also the one person chose that they will not live in those circumstances again. The other sibling chose that this is just who I am. This is who I am. This is all I know. And they can't escape it. So, I mean, it's tough. It's tough, this whole like coming full circle back to this victim mentality.
But I just want to pause there for a minute, though, because I think this is important for people to understand. They're both the same. They've just learned different ways to cope with their trauma. So some people are like, screw you, I'm going to make something of myself. And they go out and they turn into workaholics and they push themselves and all the things, right? We see this with so many successful people. They're no different than the person who's drinking or doing drugs or whatever it may be. They are both hurting humans who have learned different ways to cope. But one is celebrated and one is not. So one is not a victim and one is a victim. But the truth is, if people are working from this place of overworking and chasing their worthiness, they are still at some level being a victim, but they're a victim of themselves and they don't even realize it. Because when you're working from that survivor story, I'm a survivor, then you're still a victim of your circumstances. because you still haven't let go of what created that part of you that needs to do those things. So I know it sounds a little bit like convoluted, but I've been in the addiction, recovery, codependent community for, over a decade now. And it's so complex. And I've met so many, high achieving people who don't even realize that they are living from that victim status because they're still looking outside of themselves. And even I can get into it. We all can. So yeah, I thought it was just important to just kind of, they are the same. And
it's totally the same. And I get it. I totally get it. Okay. So, wow, this was such a great conversation. I appreciate you sharing this. And I know this is a lot of stuff that you talk about with the people that you work with, your clients and people you coach. I do have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
I was thinking about this before we started the show, because I'm like, I know Renee's going to ask me this, and I didn't want to come up with some contrived answer. And something was reflected back to me today by somebody who's really important to me, and they've watched me navigate this year. And she said, Lisa, the courage that it's taken you to put one foot in front of the other and really color outside of the lines. And that to me is what makes a wild woman, the courage to color outside of the lines, but to take it one step forward and to realize there were never any lines there to begin with, right? We get to create and write the stories of our lives. Always. There are no boxes. There are no lines. There are no rules. And I think the more we have the courage to look at that and let those go, the more we will soar. So that to me, the more women who can actually, we don't need to break the glass ceiling. What if it's not there? What if that's just a story we're telling ourselves? So I don't know. That's just my little perspective from my little corner of the world.
Yeah, we can create our own lines to color within. So if people want to go online to find you, where can they go?
They can go to my website, lisacarpenter.ca. I had to think about that for a minute. Or they can find me on Instagram or the Full Frontal Living podcast. We're on hiatus right now, but we'll be back by November.
There we go. That's next month. Get to work.
I know. I'm like, oh, that just came out of my mouth. It's fine. Yeah. I know what we're doing. We've got direction. It's all good. I'm going to do the things that
I just got to press record, baby. That's how it works. Lisa,
thank you
so much for joining us today.
It's always so great to see you, Renee. Thank you so much for having me on.